Harry Littman, we were talking about this on our prior hot take. What was Justice Merchan in New York going to do in Donald Trump's claim of absolute immunity to dismiss his criminal convictions? Well, a major loss for Donald Trump. And I think you and I, if people go back and watch our videos, I think we predicted that Trump was not going to be able to avail himself of absolute immunity. But what I'm not sure you and I fully went into, though, was what happened here. I mean, that Justice Merchan ruling was one, he made it pretty bulletproof, having multiple layers of analysis. And Justice Merchan was not scared at all to make this powerful ruling, in my opinion. Like, it was strongly worded. Merchan said the evidence of Donald Trump's felony convictions was overwhelming, without even any question that even some of this other tangential evidence that may not have come in based on the evidentiary portion of the Supreme Court's absolute immunity argument. Justice Merchan goes, that made no difference. This was an overwhelming slam dunk criminal conviction. And so, right, Justice Merchan really shored up this ruling by doing these three separate shields against Donald Trump's to appeal this all the way up to the Supreme Court, right? In the first instance, Justice Merchan is saying, look, your lawyers did not assert even the appropriate objections on absolute immunity grounds regarding a lot of the claims. Secondly, this was clearly one of the examples Justice Merchan said where this was private conduct. This is hush money payments. This is porn star stuff. This is falsification of business records. This ain't official conduct, so I don't need to hear about your Twitter accounts and all of these things. And he goes, Justice Merchan goes, if the underlying conduct is private in nature, the cover-up of the private in nature does not thereby make it official conduct in the aftermath of what went down. And then finally, that third shield is what I'm calling it. Justice Merchan said the evidence was overwhelming. This was, at most, this would have been harmless error to not, had I excluded this evidence, it would have been harmless error regardless, the fact that we let it in, and this was an overwhelming case. So, Harry, what'd you think about how strongly worded that order was?
Yeah, well, it's strongly worded. It's methodical. You know, Ben, it's actually the first really full-body treatment of the immunity case itself. He marches through. That's where we were looking for something like that, say, from Chutkan, and it fell to Merchan to do it based on what Trump was pushing for. I actually think, while we're patting ourselves on the back, we did nail the harmless error aspect of it, and it's really important because you're right, three shields, but you really got to think about it, and obviously he was, how things go on appeal, including prospectively the U.S. Supreme Court. And saying like, well, that wasn't immune conduct, that's the sort of thing courts above can try to reverse. Harmless error or failure to preserve objection, not so much. So when an appellate court gets an issue and they have a basis for affirming without getting to the harder issue, that's what they're supposed to do. And I don't see a court of appeals having any basis. Harmless error is the classic kind of situation that the judge who was there and evaluated it, and for what it's worth, I was there too, and he's right. It really was overwhelming. So we don't care if the Supreme Court in a different case might say, oh, this is immune conduct with Hope Hicks in the Oval Office. The question is it harmless error? And that is just not a weighty federal question of the sort that the Supreme Court is supposed to take, or I expect they will. So it's not simply that it was methodical and comprehensive, which it was, not simply that it was three layers, which it was, but that two of the layers give grounds that are peculiarly resistant to appellate reversal, and that really do shore this up. I don't think he's got very good odds of overturning it on this basis. And, you know, we can talk about this in a minute, but he wigged, I think I can say this on Minus One, he wigged the fuck out and, you know, called this a the end of the Constitution and the presidency as we know it. So he's obviously fit to be tied, and what he's really trying to do, in some ways, he's getting off pretty easy, and he will if Mayor Chun gives him, say, a soft sentence. But it's the fact that it remains that is obviously the burr under his saddle. And that's the sort of headline of the Mayor Chun ruling. And I think it's going to hold. It's going to be the case that, there's no way of sort of starting back at square one, which would take it off the books because, among other things, harmless error and failure to preserve objections. That's a very solid basis. And there's nothing to reverse there.
Harry, to that point about Donald Trump just losing his mind after this order, I think about the interview I did with President Biden in the Roosevelt room where President
Sorry to
Biden,
interrupt, but just kudos, getting it and executing it. I'm sorry, go ahead.
I appreciate it. Everybody can watch it on our YouTube channel. Watch the full 30 minutes because I think you see in President Biden a statesman. We were in the Roosevelt room. I think about Teddy Roosevelt saying, speak softly and carry a big stick. You don't need to be loud and obnoxious. You just got to back up your quiet confidence with real power when the time is right. So you take a look at that and you contrast that to Trump's response to this order, where Trump responds in a social media post, in a completely illegal, psychotic order, the deeply conflicted, corrupt, biased, and incompetent acting Justice Juan Merchan has completely disrespected the United States Supreme Court and its historic decision on immunity. But even without immunity, this illegitimate case is nothing but a rigged hoax. Merchan, who's a radical partisan, wrote an opinion that is knowingly unlawful, goes against our Constitution, and if allowed to stand, would be the end of the presidency as we know it. Merchan has so little respect for the Constitution, he's keeping in place an illegal gag order on me, your president and president-elect, just so I cannot expose his and his family's disqualifying illegal conflicts. I'll ask you to comment on that response, but it reminds me, like, growing up, like, seriously, a character of the supervillain on, like, the comics. Like, who speaks in language like that? So, Harry, your response.
And being grown up, if you didn't have the attribution, it reminds me of, like, some poor mentally ill soul getting up on a bus and, ending up in a straitjacket. And of course, there's so many things you can say about this. What really strikes me, and this is what I wrote about in my Substack, having won so much and having really this much left to fight about, that by automatic sort of instinct and reflex of Donald Trump becomes the biggest grievance ever. And it's just, comical. Remember way back when Anthony Scaramucci tried to read the Constitution to him and the Bill of Rights, and he kind of zoned out after Amendment 4. He is so completely legally ignorant that those kinds of assertions on top of everything else are silly. But you're right, the intemperateness of it. Just imagine that a president-elect of the United States said this. Can we think of a parallel in the, what are we at, 40 what presidents who would have ever talked that way and would have ever been less presidential? This is like a crazy person. And that's our president-elect crazy person.
Well, the next step is the sentencing. You and I have covered before. What is Justice Merchan going to do there? The district attorney, Alvin Bragg, gave a number of options there about what to do. You and I will take that on in a separate hot take, but District Attorney Alvin Bragg said you can basically press pause on it. If you decide not to sentence him, just call him a convicted felon, the same way you would with perhaps someone who they cited, like an Alabama case of, like, someone who passes away and then you sentence them in abstention because of posthumously sentencing. You and I will do a whole nother hot take on that.
But can I say something quick about it? You're right. We'll do a whole nother. But this, I think what he did, as we've just been saying, is pretty bulletproof in an appellate way. I think, however, if he initiates a sentencing, and the table is clearly set for it, he could do it tomorrow. you're going to have Trump pull out all stops to keep from that first option, actually pronouncing sentence, even though I think it's likely if he does, it would be a very light sentence, maybe only a fine. But Mayor Chun's been pretty cautious about the schedule and Trump's election. So he knows, everybody knows, if Trump can make it to January 20th, the whole framework changes. Not to say the case goes away, but maybe everything has to be on ice for 4 years. And my best guess is Mayor Chun doesn't fight that one too hard, because I think Trump will have time to at least seek an appeal and get things over the January 20th line, when everybody agrees the sort of consequences change, and you can't just make the president, as opposed to the president-elect, show up and receive his sentence.
We'll do a whole take on that. Everybody, make sure you subscribe to Harry Litman's Talking Feds YouTube channel, as well as the Talking Feds Substack. There's also the Talking Feds podcast, the universe of Talking Feds content. Check it out. It's where I get my legal news from. Talking Feds YouTube, Talking Feds Substack, Talking Feds podcast. Harry, thank you.
A lot of Feds talking. Thanks very much, Ben. And again, what a really great moment for you, and really, a justifiably really good sort of valediction by President Biden, who I think has had a rough time over this last year. I think history will record, maybe as it's sort of done with Truman, him as having been a splendid president, but he leaves now knowing that a lot of the country doesn't feel that way. Again, nothing so unusual.
Well, thanks, Harry. It's an honor to do that interview. It was shared with our co-hosts and contributors and partner channels like you and others, and the whole community here at the MeidasTouch Network, the Talking Feds, the Legal AFers, and all of our other shows. So thank you all for making that happen as well, and hit subscribe here.
Thanks for tuning in. If you enjoyed this video and other Talking Feds content, please take a second to like and subscribe. Talk to you later.